Morning, Zoe Belcher, BGT Environmental.
This was easier when it was only 30 when I started this. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Harold. You can introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Chuck. There's an awful lot going on at DEEP these days from the...
Actually, before you do that, can everybody else just mute yourself? Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck. As I was saying, there's a lot going on at DEEP these days from the RSR, the new RSR, amended RSR regulations, and the EUR regulations to release-based initiatives at the department for the remediation program, to spill regulation development and other initiatives. And I think we're all delighted to have Graham Stevens, Bureau Chief from the Water Protection and Land Reuse Division at DEEP, and Pete Zach and Lori Salaby from the Emergency Response and Spill Division at DEEP to provide us with the latest and give us an opportunity to ask some questions, because I know a lot of you have a lot of questions with respect to the implementation of the EURs and the implementation of Wave 2, as well as the status of spills, and look forward to a good discussion with Graham and Lori and Pete. And with that, I turn it over to Graham, and thank you all for being able to participate today. We have a very good crowd. We're up to 88 participants. So you guys know how to throw a big party. And Graham, it's all yours.
And just one reminder, we'll hold questions till after the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Harold. It's great to be back at E2. I'm glad I didn't have to walk across the park to be with you today, because a little bit snowy out there. Hope everyone's warmed up from the shoveling this morning. I haven't shoveled yet. Hopefully later today during lunch I can shovel and take up my trash can, which I realize I've left down there for over a day. Being in a COVID lockdown is certainly a change. But one thing it has afforded everyone at DEEP is a lot of time to work on a lot of different initiatives. So yes, thank you, Harold. Definitely a lot of progress on a lot of different fronts. And we want to share with you some of those updates today. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that works. If everyone can just, if someone can nod their head. Marcy, you see the first slide there, our beautiful DEEP cover sheet. You know, maybe we need to update a few of these. I don't know if the fox deserves a top billing, but there you go. Certainly don't put a bear up there. That would certainly cause too much issues. So here we go. So Lori and I are going to take you through some updates, you know, on a lot of different topics. We'll try to move fairly quickly because I imagine there'll be a lot of questions that you want to ask us. And, you know, as we always know, sometimes the details are the important part. So congratulations to everyone. 7 years in the making, and we have success with the adoption of the amended remediation standard regulations and environmental use regulations. So it is something that I've been involved in for a very short period of time. Someone congratulated me. I said that same thing to them. They said the last part is the most important part, so I'll take that. But I know that the team at DEEP has been working for many years trying to collaborate with stakeholders, working through a lot of these concepts at a conceptual level for a long time, and really put in a lot of effort to try to put that into regulation form. Here is the link for the, and I will share this presentation at the end of the day, so you can have all these links. You don't have to write them all down. It's too many dots and dashes. But here at our webpage, you'll find more information about the RSRs and EURs. I just want to acknowledge that this was one of the commissioner's 20 by 20 goals, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute. So what does this mean? Well, it means the RSRs are in effect, the EURs are in effect as of 3 days ago. So hot off the presses, so to speak. And administratively, we're going to be we're working right now on fact sheets, on the all-important document that shows the changes. During our regulation adoption process, the Secretary of State changed their IT system for regulations. So we had to start in one system and finish in a new system that no one had ever used before. It doesn't have the best outputs as far as compare documents, but we're working on that internally to get that up because I know folks love to look at the old language versus the new language. But a few important transition items. DEEP is going to honor all existing commissioner approvals for future verifications. We'll also honor complete applications. But an important thing to remember, we've made a lot of changes to the RSRs that in some cases, eliminate the need for commissioner approval. So if you have a pending application that is now available for LEP implemented option, I would suggest withdrawal of that application and proceeding under the LEP process. The one piece of transition that's hard-coded into the RSRs is the transition on the volatilization criteria. That's similar back to our 2013 changes with respect to some of the standards. And again, like I said, we're working right now on web content, working on some Q&As that go through some of these issues, and we're always here to work through any particular difficult issues that you might encounter. So environmental use restrictions. There's been a lot of, flurry of activity. If you had pending ELURs, we've been having everybody on the team, really trying to hustle through those applications. And what we've decided to do is to draw a line in the sand with respect to complete applications. So if you have received one of our letters that is a notice of administrative completeness, then that is something that is good. So you will be able to proceed, as applied. We're also trying we've also been trying to quickly get through those in advance of the adoption of the regs. We may not have gotten the letter out, but if we may have been in communication with you and your client and counsel on that package. So there's also an opportunity here to withdraw an application if you want to change how you're implementing these use restrictions. Same comment, lots of great web content, Q&As are coming soon, and we are here to assist. So moving into the future, you can see our fantastic infographic here. It is 79 Elm Street, so we're not trying to point any fingers at anyone's decrepit building, although given the fact that we haven't been there in almost a year, it may look like this. Actually, I do go in to sign the LURs because many clerks require a wet ink signature, even though there's an executive order saying that they don't need to have that. But really, and many of you have heard this before, we're trying to really streamline the cleanup process. We're trying to, make it, more business driven, have the triggers be based on business decisions, and try to make the program as simple to implement as possible, and similar to 48 other states. Anytime you're one out of 2 or 3 states that does something differently, you either have to ask yourself, is it because we're the best and no one else is caught on, or are we missing something? Now, the Transfer Act has done great work over the years addressing many, large-scale pollution problems across the state, but for every one of those successes, you know, we've heard of several situations where sites got entangled in the Transfer Act and complicated real estate transactions, or, you know, was a deterrent to transactions. And we're hopeful that this will be a new system that creates more equity and hopefully also, you know, helps the state capitalize on the uptick in its economic prospects, and really creates a greater platform for economic recovery and redevelopment. So this past special session in September, Public Act 20-9 was passed, and that created the authorization for the release-based cleanup program. But that release-based cleanup program doesn't go into effect until after regulations specifying how the program would operate are adopted. Now, you heard me say 7 years. It is certainly our goal to greatly beat that time frame for the adoption of these regulations. But I have been telling people, you know, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change the way that we do business in the state, and it affects many, many other sectors besides the cleanup world. So we want to get it right. And one of the ways that we're trying to get that right is working with stakeholders in a very prescribed manner. And you'll see if you read 20-9, if you haven't already, it's a great read, that we have this hard-coded stakeholder work group that's in statute. And that working group has been co-convened by the commissioners of DEEP and the Department of Economic and Community Development. And you'll see all of the various stakeholder cohort groups that are identified. These were all in statute. It's a large group. If call-in user number 6 can mute, that would be great. Thank you. So we've had 3 meetings thus far, and this group has been convened to advise the state on the regulations. We want to make sure that these regulations, when we adopt them, are practical and can be easily implemented, because we don't want this new program to be a deterrent for cleanup and transactions like we feel that the Transfer Act may have been, you know, in the last several years for certain sites. So we meet monthly. It is a public meeting. Please, you know, feel free to participate. If you could, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Someone's asking me to switch out of presenter view. I don't think I know how to do that. My apologies. I'm a Zoom person, not a WebEx person. So there's minutes, recordings of these meetings available online. One of the first acts of this working group was to create subcommittees. It's the first phase of subcommittees has initiated. There's been 5 subcommittees convened on topics. Although they all have had multiple meetings, I think 3 or 4 meetings each. And these groups are going to be tackling discrete topics about the regulations and providing concept papers to the working group, who will then post them for public comment and participation, and then digesting those concept papers and the public feedback. The working group will provide advice to DEEP about the regulations. Stay engaged. Check out our webpage. Make sure you're signed up for e-alerts. Send emails to the dedicated email address. It's important that we all work on this together if we want to get it right. A few other quick updates before I pass it on to Lori. Everybody's been hearing about Pfas. It's in the paper all the time. That is the case with emerging contaminants. We're learning a lot about them as we go. There was a large effort by multiple stakeholders and agencies to come up with a Pfas action plan. Some of the big ticket items that we're working on right now is a take-back program for AFFF, which is concentrated Pfas, a firefighting foam, and that is really starting to kick into gear now. We've been working with DESPE on, what would be a safe and an effective alternative, fluorine-free foams, and that has been communicated to the departments, the fire departments, and state agencies that operate fire services, so that now we know, what can be purchased that actually is fluorine-free. We worked with the state of Massachusetts to test and analyze many different types of foams that had certain statements and claims about their content. So that will mean that in the future, we're not going to be bringing in more PFAS as AFFF, and in the future, firefighting foam will not be potentially contaminating our waterways and our drinking water resources. We're also working on a GIS screening tool for PFAS releases and potential areas where PFAS may be an issue, with the goal of some targeted private well sampling. We need to start looking at the highest risks to public health and safety and address those promptly. And thankfully, we have money from the State Bond Commission for these initiatives, and are working very closely with our sister agency, Department of Public Health, who's also provided us some funding to do some sampling. And finally, we're doing where we've initiated or we're setting up a program to sample a subset of wastewater treatment plants. And then 20 by 20, I mentioned it earlier, the final report is coming soon. It is 2021 after all, so that's great. If you don't know about 20 by 20, please do, check out our webpage, because you'll see 20 topics where we've made significant progress over the course of the year 2020. And I believe there's an opportunity for Deep to come back maybe next month, if we're permitted, to talk more about that in depth.
Welcome to WebEx.
And the final topic I just wanted to mention, you may have received an email from Deep about our client concierge service and permanent assistance. This too is a 20 by 20 goal. Goal number 12. You should check out, if you didn't receive the email communication from us, you should check out this web address and see what that program is all about. It's next level customer support for permit applicants who have complex projects, usually with multiple environmental permits. So I'm going to pass the mic to Lori. Lori, I will drive. I will mute myself if I can figure out how to do that, and I'll let you go from here. Thank you.
Hey, this is Harold. I'd just like to remind everybody to stay on mute to get some feedback.
Lori's been having some technical problems.
Can everybody hear me? Oh God. Can you guys hear me?
Now.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, great. So I don't know if I can advance the slides. Maybe whoever had control can advance them for me. My WebEx app is not working so well today.
I'll advance them for you, Lori.
That'd be great. Thanks, Graham. Okay, so update on release reporting regulations. I know that many of you were involved with our stakeholder engagement over the summer last year, and we had a really great feedback from all the commenters. We had a comment period for 30 days, and we had some really great feedback. And as you guys may or may not know, the presentation from last summer is up on the website along with all the supporting documents. So this link that's showing in the slide right now, that's where you can go to see all that information that we presented last summer. And we hope to be updating that soon. Next slide. Okay, so we did receive, besides a myriad of emails, we received 9 comment letters. Those contained about 45 specific comments on the concepts presented. The comments concern topics as detailed as when to report spills in laboratory settings, and technical, such as the reporting quantities for specific substances. So it was really good feedback. Next. Thanks. So the topics of more universal concern out of these 45 comments, kind of synthesizing them down to common themes, included one really positive thing that was pretty widespread among the commenters, was that what we were proposing was a significant improvement over the current state. So that was great feedback to hear. And I think a lot of it had to do with the history that we have had on release reporting. As you guys know, we've made several attempts at this, so we had, you know, a pretty good handle on what the concerns were and where we needed to focus our efforts. So I think, you know, the history of it played into making it, you know, a really great proposal. So applicability to historic releases was one concern. And as you guys know, with, you know, the release-based efforts that's happening now, this is really a spill reporting regulation. So it doesn't really have a relationship, per se, to the historic releases. Who's obligated to report? So we covered that pretty thoroughly, I think, in the draft regulation. The meanings of certain terms, people were concerned, and I think that that is also going to be explained in the draft regulation. The triggers, timeframes, closure of reported releases. How do you get to close on a contemporaneous release that's reported? And reportable quantities. There was a lot of discussion on reportable quantities. Interestingly enough, there were pleas for both increasing and decreasing what we had presented in the concepts last summer. So that was interesting. Also, there was an ask for numeric criteria for substances in Appendix A, and developing separate toxicity-based RQs for every individual substance as opposed to broad-based category RQs. And then requests about or suggestions for additional exemptions. So that pretty much were the repeating themes that we were seeing in the comments. Next. So the current status with these regulations is that with the, you know, we've drafted them now with consideration for the comments that we received, and we completed that drafting process in the fall and submitted the draft regulation both to the Attorney General's office and to OPM. And OPM has now, as of last week, forwarded the package on to the governor's office. So that was great news. The Attorney General's office had recommended certain minor edits to the draft, which we only received again last week. And so we're working our way through those, and we intend to you know, have thoughtful discussions with the AGs about their comments. So that's where we're at with the status. Next. Okay, so you guys have all seen this before, and it's had some minor tweaks and revisions based on feedback that we received in both the comments as well as you know, just as we worked our way through it, things that needed to be fixed, changed, or what have you. So this is currently up on the website at the link. So anybody who really wants to dig into this can see it, but basically it forms the same, it's the same basic format as what we presented last summer. So when you look at the top half, what you see are things that would automatically be reportable. So a release to a waterway, things like that. So there's no discussion of quantity. It's just bang, this is a reportable item. And then similarly, those are in the green boxes. In the yellow boxes are the things that would automatically not be reportable. And so once you get through that, so those are your first determinations. Or do I have something that would automatically be reportable regardless of any other factors? Or do I have something that's automatically not reportable? And once you answer those two questions, if you don't fall into either one of those categories, sorry, then you go down to the two paths. So the first question that kicks off the two paths is it petroleum or is it not petroleum? And again, the reason why we formulated it that way is because when you look at the spill statistics, what you see is that 70% roughly of the spills and releases that are called in are petroleum products. And so it made sense to make petroleum a separate category. So the first question being, is it or is it not petroleum? So if it is petroleum, you would go down the left side in those red boxes. And if it's not petroleum, you would go down the right side into the blue boxes. So, you know, we tried to streamline it and make it, you know, as user-friendly as possible. So, you know, that's pretty much the update on this. I mean, in terms of its relationship to the release-based regulation process that's going on now, and I know many of you are participating in the subgroups and the committee, but, you know, these regulations are on an independent track, and so these are going to keep rolling down the track regardless of the other process. So they're on, you know, parallel but different paths here. So just to clarify what is happening with these. So they're going. Anyway, I hope that kind of gives you guys a flavor. I know that there's been a lot of interest in the comments. I hope that this answered some of the questions about the comment feedback that we've been getting, and I hope to make those available, you know, in the future on that link that we have. So that's what I have.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks very much for the presentation. I think what we'll do, unless Pete, you have something that you'd like to add to Lori's comments, I think we will open it up to questions on the presentation. You can chime in with a question, or you can put it in the chat, and Graham, Lori, and Pete will answer. I think there was one on the chat already. Graham, well, Graham, there's two on the chat already if you want to take them. One has to do with when a clean version of the RSRs will be available to download, and then there's a question on grandfathering.
I guess I believe, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct here, the Secretary of State does have the clean version of the RSRs available on their e-regs portal. A link to which is on our splash page for the RSRs and EURs that I had listed in the presentation, which I'll send out shortly. And what would you like me to take next?
There's two questions for you. One on grandfathering, and a couple of questions on PFAS, Graham.
Yeah, so the question on the volatilization criteria grandfathering, there's a transition period that's hard-coded into the regulations, which you'll want to look at very carefully as far as timeframes for, you know, the new regulation being in effect solely, or an alternative for utilizing the past regulation. AFFF, the fluorine-free foam approved by Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection was posted on their webpage. I just was trying to Google that. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can certainly, when I send the presentation, I will send that link out as well. And then I believe someone is asking, as part of the PFAS take-back program, is there a plan for how to dispose of the PFAS? That is something that the state is trying to work through right now, as far as what the final disposition of that, foam concentrate will be. We're obviously going to use, licensed contractors to collect and dispose of the foam in a manner that is consistent with, regulations and standards. So permanent facilities, permanent disposal options are under consideration at this time. And I think there was also a question about private industry and AFFF. I might have missed it. Here, yes. Is the AFFF take-back program available to private industry? And no, it is not. The monies that were provided to DEEP are for municipal fire departments and for state agency, firefighting apparatus with AFFF. So questions on forms. When do we expect the new ELUR application to be available? I would say, sit tight for just a little bit longer. We're working on all of those forms. I think I have about 40 forms to review in my inbox. So that's one of the assignments for today for me. We will have a lot more information up on our webpage in short order. When we do, we will send out an e-alert. So if you go to our webpage and you're interested in more information about a topic, you can sign up for e-alerts if you haven't already. It's an important way to stay in contact with us when we make changes that are of interest to many. We send out an e-alert with that change. We don't just plop it up on the webpage and hope everybody keeps checking back. A comment on the file room. With COVID, DEEP's file room originally was shut for public access. During that entire period, the file room staff were processing requests for information, and we're sending that information out to the requesters. Some of the requests were too voluminous or too undefined for the file room staff to fill. So those were backlogged requests. Many months ago, I think about 4 or 5 months ago now, we opened the file room for appointments only. And I know that there is some wait required to get through that backlog list, as well as more recent requests for files. It is something that we're very well aware of, and Betsy Wingfield and myself, and in particular, have been working with our Office of Information Management, as well as the Department of Administrative Services, and the state's rules on visitors in state buildings to try to accommodate those requests.
Hey, Graham, can I add something to that? This is Pete.
Sure. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that we've had an initiative going on in my division to scan all the spill reports and correspondence. If people know that that's one of the more accessed information, and we're almost done with all the scanning. So a lot of that information is already available through our website. It's includes the initial spill report, and it goes back back into the, I think, almost the 70s in some cases, and includes all the correspondence and reports that might have come in after the spill, including the DEEP's inspector's report. So again, that is available, and it should be wrapping up and be completed probably by this spring. So that was something I always was a big priority of mine to get that done, because it was using up a lot of our staff time, and now it should be accessible.
That's a great point, Pete, and maybe one of the follow-up items we can provide too is a link to the online portal so folks can search. You know, obviously there's not complete access to all of our records yet, but also the remediation folks are next in line for a major scanning project to scan all of the remediation files. So those will be searchable through our portal at some point in the future. And that obviously would be a massive benefit to the regulated community because, yeah, the spills files and the remediation files constitute 80% of the requests to the file room.
And also on that front, I'd like to add too that available on DEEP's website, you can get all of the UST notification information on the Easy File public search function. So that's also up on the web and available.
And then the last unaddressed comment as far as my keeping track is from Beth Barton saying, what if anything will be happening with the EUR and verification forms, and if the forms will be changing the anticipated time frame for their availability as well as what folks should do in the interim. So if you have a project that requires the use of one of the forms that is yet to be updated, I would use the existing forms that are available. The time frame is in the next, you know, I hope less than 10 days, we will have a majority of the forms available on our webpage, and we will be sending out alerts when we post those forms. We're working on the forms that have the highest use and working our way down. Obviously, for those who've been participating in the regulatory process, there's a lot of forms mentioned. So we're trying to work on those forms and work on forms that might be useful for multiple purposes. So it's not a world of forms that we all need to wade through. So I think that's the chat function addressed. I think you're on mute, Harold.
Thanks, Graham. I have a question for you and or Lori and Pete. Could talk a little bit more about the path forward for the spill regulations and when the draft regulations might be shared or posted?
Sure. So at this point, the regulations are with the governor's office, and we are making, you know, edits based on minor edits based on comments from the Attorney General's office. So once we clear that task, getting the revisions and getting to the governor's office, then the regulations will be made publicly available.
Before they go to notice?
More than likely. I mean, with definitely out, of course, after they go to notice. But I mean, once we clear the governor's office, you know, we can probably make those available to whoever is looking for them.
Thanks, Lori. And I assume there will be information sessions on this as well.
So I don't think we were planning on doing information sessions. I think our vision was, because we did the stakeholder engagement last summer, that we were going to, you know, just have our public comment period, and we were going to hold a public hearing. So that was going to be the opportunity to, you know, comment and have input. And, you know, because we did a pretty robust stakeholder engagement the last time we went through this too, with work groups similar to what they're doing right now for release-based. And so, you know, our thought was that you know, really what we were just going to rely upon was the comments and feedback that we get back in the public comment period.
Thanks, Lori. It might be worth given that what's going to be rolled out is putting an awful lot of detail into the overall concepts. It might be worth giving some additional thought and revisiting the information session idea, but I just raised that. Graham, there's a couple of questions with respect to the 20 by 20 initiative, and whether or not there are any plans for 21 by 21 or one more in 21.
One more in 21 might be a better option than 21 by 21. But joking aside, I'm not certain. I haven't heard plans for 21 by 21. You know, I think you know, that's a commissioner's initiative. Maybe best for Betsy to address that if she's able to attend next month. You know, I think that across the department there was, you know, a massive amount of work that went into 20 by 20. You're hearing about, you know, you've heard about 3 of those initiatives here today. There's 17 others, and as folks may remember, you know, the spill regs, release reporting regs, were one of the 20 by 20 goals as well. I think that goal was actually suggested by CBIA, if I recall correctly. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think we need to, what I think we need to work on, and I'm not the boss, is I think we really need to start focusing on what DEEP is going to do to address, you know, the retirements that are already occurring and will happen in large numbers in the middle of 2022. So if folks recall from previous conversations, you know, DEEP may see up to 40% retirement rate happening all within the next, you know, many months. So that is something that you know, I've been focusing on. I commit, you know, half of a day per week to that issue, trying to come up with plans to, you know, buffer that solution during what's going to be a potentially very challenging time for state government and for all of the folks who rely upon our services. So I think that's my one more for 21 is try to come up with a useful plan for dealing with that change in change in number of staff at DEEP. And I also added into the chat in response to the question the AFFF replacement off of the state's webpage, which lists the fluorine-free alternative foam that was selected between DEEP and DESP.
Thanks, Graham. Any more questions? Going once, going twice.
Harold?
Yes.
Hi, this is Deb DeFelice. I just put one in the chat. The risk management, it's to Lori, are the risk management plan materials still included in Appendix A? That's the materials that have to be reported at any quantity, even small quantities. The RMP materials, if you recall, are materials that are a concern at, most of them are 10,000 pounds or more, but there are some that are 20,000 pounds and include materials like ammonia, propane, methane, hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, all flammables over 10,000 pounds. So if that's in Appendix A, saying any amount of this must be reported, then it makes Appendix A much bigger than the rest of the regulation because it's really common materials.
Yes, they are really common materials. in certain settings. However, I would point out that statistically speaking, what is currently happening now is that less than 30% of the total releases called into the agency are materials other than petroleum. And so this represents a small portion of the overall spill universe. And, you know, it's still our anticipation that based on the way that this has shaped up, we will be cutting by 40% or more the reportable releases that have to be called into the department. So there's a lot of relief there, but, you know, in consultation with Dr. Callender over at Department of Public Health, there was a strong feeling that the materials on Appendix A, you know, needed to be reported. Again, these are reporting only, reported. And if there are specific chemicals on Appendix A that people would like to comment on in terms of, you know, excluding, certainly feel free to comment on that and say, you know, that you think that this should be, you know, lumped in with the normal threshold rather than Appendix A, you know, and we can take all that under advisement.
I think the reason you're probably getting none of these now is because if you had a, say you had a half a pound gaseous leak of propane from a fork truck, say I put the cylinder on wrong, so it doesn't meet the normal operation because I put it on wrong, I would not call that in. So we wouldn't have those now, but the way I read the regulation, I would have to call that in the future.
Well, I would say that our interpretation of the current state is that all releases are required to be called in of any material at any concentration. That's what we consider to be the current state. And so, so yes, I mean, I hear you about the propane, and you know, I think that's something worth exploring. And so certainly, you know, if you we have the dedicated email set up for the comments. If you can, you know, shoot me an email in that dedicated email address, or just to my email, lori.salabai@ct.gov, and I'll add it to those comments, then we can look at that.
Thank you. It's specifically the gaseous small amounts. The operator probably wouldn't even tell me that he didn't put the propane cylinder on right. I wouldn't even know it.
Right.
I just want to add one other thing too to remember is that, you know, I know you have hydrochloric acid and nitric acid listed. Remember, these are in greater than 30% concentration. So these are not consumer level concentrations usually at that level. So these are industrial, high strength, less common concentrations for some of these other items.
I'm more concerned about the gaseous ones. I try and follow all these rules, but the gaseous ones in small amounts are going to be almost impossible.
Thanks,
That's why
Debbie.
we engage. That's why we engage with the public. I mean, this is the process, and I'm actually. I thought I don't know if everyone's just tired from snow shoveling. I thought we'd have more comments, but we really appreciate the feedback, because I think whether it's release-based or release reporting regulations or 20 by 20, you know, we're all in this together. So we need to find a way to make sure that what we're creating is something that can be implemented practically, and that what we're you know, meets our charge of protecting the environment, public health and safety.
Thanks, Graham. Very much appreciative of the opportunity to interact with all of you today. Appreciate the information, new information conveyed that I don't think we've heard before as well. And we will use the opportunity to provide input through the comments to the spills, and the opportunity to interact with all of you as well. We're coming up on, or a little bit past 9:30. We appreciate all the time that you've given us, and I'm going to turn this back over. Thank you again, and I'm going to turn this back over to Chuck.
Just quickly, another comment showed up in the. I just want to quickly address about the sulfuric acid drain cleaner, right? So there's a provision in the draft regulation that says unless it's a consumer product used for its intended purpose. So that would carve that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Chuck, I think you need to come off mute if you want to say something.
I do. Thank you, Graham, Pete, Lori, and thank you for all the work. I know that a lot of time and effort's going into this, and it's been a long time in the making, 7 years for the EUR and the RSRs, but it's been more than that for the spill regs, as we know, since we've never had any, so. All right. Thanks, and Harold, actually, I'm going to turn it right back over to you and Mark, because the Waste Committee is up first. And
all right, folks, I'm gonna jump off. I just want to say again, thank you very much for having me. It's always fun to walk across the park and drink some coffee with you and share our updates and hear your feedback. So thank you all very much.
Coffee was our treat today, Graham.
yeah,
Oh,
I
you're
did
the
forget
best,
to
Harold.
mention the big buffet we have over at CBIA, but it's all in Marcy's hand right now.
Lucky Marcy. She needs something for dealing with this meeting. So thank you, Marcy, too, for putting it together. All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye
I'm
now.
signing off too. Bye.
So,
Okay.
Marcy, Harold and Mark, do you have a waste presentation that Marcy's going to upload?
There is a
Here it comes.
there is a presentation.
There it is.
Graham has done a good job of covering the topics that I normally would cover. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark to cover his side of the house, and I will come back and pick up anything if there's any questions on the RSR's release-based side, but I've covered it already, or Graham's covered it already in detail, and there's no need for me to repeat that. But I'll turn it over to Mark if he's got some updates for you as well.
Okay, very quickly, the Commissioner and Waste Engineering and Enforcement Group has been spending a lot of time with municipalities promoting what they call a Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. And as of the moment, there's no proposal for any new infrastructure. And going back to a presentation done by CRRA at the time and now called MIRA, they were presenting information indicating that if the facility closes, it could add an additional 300 tractor trailers of waste onto the roads once that facility closes, which is now scheduled to happen next year. So that equates, if it's one shift, that's roughly 40 tractor trailers an hour. And so I think we have a huge looming problem in New England because the shortfall in capacity applies to Massachusetts as well. Recycling is not going to have a significant impact on reducing waste generation anytime soon. Markets are very tight. In addition, the trade press is reporting very expensive rates for shipping, difficulty getting shipping containers, delays in the movement of materials, commodities, and so forth. So we're not in a good position to deal with current situation. And at least from the numbers I'm looking at for towns that I represent, the increase in the amount of residential waste ranges from 5% to 30%. And I have 6 communities in double-digit increases with a population equivalent to the city of Bridgeport. So if you can imagine, a city like Bridgeport having 15-20% increase just in their residential waste, it's a very significant problem. And solutions are hard to come by without enormous investment in the infrastructure. And the only thing that's really new in terms of something innovative and perhaps significant for the state is the startup of a new facility in Beacon Falls known as Positive or Urban Mining. And that facility is intended to take crushed glass, which has been a problem for the recycling facilities. So I'll leave it at that and take any questions you might have. Okay, Harold, anything else you want to add, or Chuck?
Chuck, given that we took an hour with Graham, give or take, and Mark's report, happy to answer any questions, but I think we've covered the territory, and this month provide a little more time for others.
Rachel has.
We're ahead of schedule because you guys weren't scheduled to start till 9:45. So feel free to talk. I'm going to throw out a question for you, Harold, and the rest of the smart attorneys and the smart LEPs out there. I know there was issue concerning the RSRs and whether that the way that DEP wrote them up, that they were going to apply automatically now to every cleanup in Connecticut. And I don't know how that necessarily ended up. If someone wants to talk about that, are the RSRs now applying to every cleanup in Connecticut? I know there's concern about that.
We're trying to figure that out. It's not actually in wave 2. It's in the statement of reason in the hearing officer's report. And we are working on that, trying to figure that out, because that is frightening.
So is EPOC going to do something about that? Spread the word, so to speak?
When we get a better handle on it, we will spread the word. We're actively trying to get a better handle on it.
It seems a little odds with, going forward with a release-based system, which will then have it apply to everything once that's enacted. But
right. So technically, this is only a 2-year problem, but it's a 2-year problem.
You're very optimistic that we're going to get it all done in 2 years.
It should be noted that there's information, even on DEEP's website, back in 2011, indicating in tables in the transition reports, transformation reports, that indicate what RSRs apply to and what they don't. So the statement of reasons saying it always applied, I think, is in conflict with what DEEP has professed in the past, that the RSRs don't apply to all of cleanups. So they did not change the applicability section legally, but there's a lot of people who say that the statement of reasons, although maybe not legally effective, I'd like to hear from others, it is a misstatement in my book, but who am I? That was Nancy. I'm off.
You're Nancy. That's who you are.
Rachel had a question about the glass. And my answer is, I don't really know if the product that the company in Beacon Falls will make is going to be allowed to be used in Connecticut because of the whole beneficial use determination process. So in the past, that's been a barrier to applications involving waste products. And in addition to the beneficial use determination issue, there's also a question about whether DOT would allow use of the product in paving. So the company has experience marketing their product, but I don't know to what extent DEEP will restrict applications just in the state of Connecticut.
Okay, thank you.
Chuck,
Yes.
just to offer on the RSR cleanup applicability question. So on the regular, Senator Hartley offered up a comment that she was aware of this issue and she was encouraging, I don't remember the exact language, but she kind of flagged the issue and said that her expectation was that DEEP would be working with the consulting community and others to make sure basically that it doesn't create the problems that we're concerned about. So it wasn't a really specific statement, but what I would recommend is that, and I think I've talked with Rachel about this, to the extent that folks are running into situations where DEEP is requiring RSR cleanups where they would not have in the past, to make sure those are documented and compiled so that, you know, if and when this does become a problem, there's that, in fact, it's a problem. So anyways, little consolation, but just, you know, this is a potential problem.
So you broke up, at least on my computer. I don't know about anybody else, but when you said she, who was she, Eric?
I was talking about Senator Hartley and the Regulations Review Committee.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Well, Eric, I can say it's definitely a problem. I have not, Brian Freeman here, I have not had DEEP come and try to force that position on any particular sites, but just for transactions alone, it makes it extremely difficult to deal with something that DEEP said in an official capacity that is clearly at odds with decades of practice. And when you dig into the statement in the hearing officer's report, and the case is cited, it's very slim support for the propositions that they claim. So it's already a problem.
Yeah, Brian, I would agree. I mean, DEEP hasn't really chimed in yet because if you think about it, the kinds of things we're talking about, in part, a good portion of them are what we call unregulated cleanups. We've negotiated deals with clients where Transfer Act doesn't apply or there is no regulatory program. We call those, you know, unregulated cleanups, and we don't necessarily knock on DEEP's door to discuss them. So that's where part of the rub is, I think, and why, you know, I think going forward, yes, we may hear from DEEP if somebody reaches out to them and says, what do I do with this? But I think in the past, I'm concerned about all the properties that have been cleaned up, for which DEEP has said oftentimes, you know, it's not a regulated program. Don't talk to us. RSRs don't apply, kind of thing. If you want our opinion, put it in a program. But I think there's a whole universe of properties that have been cleaned up consistent with the RSRs, for which this could pose problems in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Beth. I mean, even as just a practical matter, you take something like the way the Wave 2 addresses the concept of public notice. How are you possibly going to deal with that where you've, to Nancy's point, cleaned something up in the past, or even for that matter, where you clean something up pursuant to an order? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And there's no recognition of any of that.
I just want to add one other thing. You know, when Lori mentioned about the spill statute and sort of that applying to any type of spill, just remember, everybody, that the statute does use the word that potential threat to human health or the environment. And that clause was added in through efforts of CBIA many, many moons ago, as Eric may recall. And it seems like they just want to write that out of the statute. But, you know, for those small air releases, like a little bit of propane, you know, I think if you ask a number of people, they would say that's not reportable, unless it poses a potential threat to human health or the environment, not because it was 1 ounce of propane. But so just remember that. But we'll see what the regs finally do. So.
The problem is, I think, or part of the problem is that DEEP is free to make those interpretations until and unless somebody takes them to court, and nobody wants to do that. So, you know, I think if it really is a problem, the applicability problem really is a problem now, you know, I don't see any way to resolve that unless A, somebody's willing to take them to court, or B, you make an initiative at the legislature to try and incorporate language that clarifies it. But there's obviously risks in both of those cases. And I don't envy the attorneys who have to, you know, protect their client with a worst case scenario. But I guess that's where we are at this point.
Remember the last time we went to war, not war, but, you know, on the regulatory development, and I think Matt was involved with that, with some issues on some gas station owners, and but that didn't go so well. Right, Matt?
For curiosity, have there been discussions with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner on this specific issue, and have they staked in on the issue that DEEP has staked out in the hearing officer report specifically, or are they aware of the issue but haven't you know, really put their weight behind it?
I can't. Oh, go ahead.
Part of the calculus that went into how to deal with this at the Regulation Review Committee level was the feeling that if you pin DEEPs back to the wall on this, they will take the aggressive position that that's what it means, that everything has to go to be cleaned up by RSRs. I don't know. I mean, I've talked about it in passing with Betsy. I mean, my gut would be that they're not going to go crazy with this, particularly to Nancy's point. If you have the option of not to bring it to their attention, then don't bring it to their attention. But I think if they get pushed to the wall, either legally or politically on this, I think you have to be careful what might happen at that point, as was the case in that declaratory ruling request that you were just referring to. You know, careful what you ask for, I guess.
Yeah, no, it wasn't meaning to suggest any particular tactic, but it seems like it's got very strong support from DEP's legal counsel. Not clear to what extent that is shared beyond legal counsel, you know, to what degree that's shared. I'm sure it is. But anyway, thanks for the clarification.
So Brian, the thing about, you know, Antea and the department and their discussions, and you brought up the point of like with you know, taking it to court, if you will. But the problem with taking it to court is that after years of going back and forth, and I do think a lot of the issues got obscured and confused, and it seemed to me in reading some of the opinions back from the department, there was a lot of circular reasoning, but nonetheless, you know, the ultimate result of all of that, and quite a large amount of money, was that the judge just threw it back and said, you know, you guys have to, you know, keep trying to work it out, and they are. So there is ongoing intermittent conversation between the department and Antea trying to figure out, you know, whether there can be a meeting of the minds. And I just wanted to throw something else out. So Beth mentioned, you know, what do you do when he comes in and says, you know, hey, you didn't provide public notice for your remediation back in 2000 or 1998. And we've ended up having to deal with that several times. And the answer is, that you file a public notice that a remediation was performed 20 years ago, and the department says, that's fine, we just need a copy of a public notice, and so we find ourselves in the position of filing public notices, often saying that remediation was reportedly done by some prior consultant of which there's no record, or something like that, but the department just seems happy as long as they have a public notice, and then they can check off a box and move on. It seems a little silly, but we've now done it several times.
To your point, I have done certain high-level sites that are not in programs. We public notice, because in the event, it's sort of like okay, it was public noticed, even though we didn't have to, but that is the glitch that DEEP seems to hang their hat on in terms of the applicability of the RSRs. So I've done the same thing as you, Matt, post public notices just to satisfy that. And I agree with you, it does seem rather odd. But we sometimes do issue a public notice, put up a sign, or do whatever it is necessary so that at least we're conforming to that requirement. Not always so easy, and some clients don't want to do that.
I've heard Graham on numerous occasions talk about how if you're going to do a remediation and you want to be able to take credit for it at some later time, the public notice should be made so that you can. Otherwise, the department won't recognize it.
Okay. I'm sure all you smart people on all these topical subcommittees are going to be able to figure this all out, and we're going to have an excellent program in the next 2 years. We're going to move over to the water task force summary. So Debbie and Wojtek, you'll be up as soon as the presentation's uploaded by Marcy.
Thanks, Jack. Let's see, of note this month, the EPA has released for final issuance their 2021 multi-sector general permit, which is applicable to the industrial stormwater discharges in EPA ruling states. So that would be Massachusetts and New Hampshire in EPA Region 1. They are offering webinars to review what the requirements are. There was one yesterday, and there's one coming up on March 4th. They had to schedule a second session. So that's kind of important for us because we've been told by Ozzy that our new industrial stormwater general permit will closely mirror. Of course, we have to have a couple of additional tweaks here in Connecticut, but should closely resemble the EPA's multi-sector general permit. So I was not able to attend yesterday, scheduled to go to the March 4th webinar. Let's see, reminder that the water diversion reporting for 2020 was due last month. SIU general permit, MIU general permit, we have a couple more months for those. I still have not submitted any. Everybody seems to be enjoying our extra time here to have to register or notify. Let's see. I think that's about it. Wojtek, anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, you kind of covered it. We're still collecting samples and trying to assemble the package for the SIU GP that will go to MDC. My understanding is that's what everybody's going to do, and then once they have the POTW's approval, you can finalize your application and submit it to DEEP by end of April.
Yeah. Yep. So the time frame there is a little unknown for somebody like the MDC, how long it's going to take them to register or to review your registration package. So would encourage you to get those in as soon as possible. I see Jason has a question about should SIUs be complying with the new SIU general permit now? And yes, that's actually stated in the general permit. So yes.
And speaking of the stormwater general permit for industries, maybe we should reach out to DEEP and have them speak to that, seeing that it is expiring coming up soon now, and we'll see whether they'll be able to navigate through all the changes like you had mentioned, Deb.
Right. Yep. I will see if I can get a response from Ozzy. Let's see. And just a plug for next month, we have Janine Burke-Wells coming in to talk to us about POTWs and PFAS in biosolids and how that's going to affect us. But yep, good point, Wojtek. I will check in with Ozzy. He was still adamant that they were going to meet the deadline. So last time the industrial stormwater general permit was issued, it came out in, I believe it was July, and we had to comply by the end of September. So I will check in with him on timeline for that.
Thank you, Debbie. And just a reminder to everybody else on a different note, your tier 2 reports are due March 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, that's it for us. Back to you, Chuck.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your wonderful 17-page presentation, which people, Marcy sent out a link this morning that contains that, and I believe the waste was there as well. Next up is the air group, and Steve and Dave. I'm not sure who's on.
Good morning. Yes, Steve is not able to join us today. So just have a few quick air updates. Just a reminder that March 1st, again, so about a week left till GPLBE certifications are due. Title V annual compliance certifications and semi-annual monitoring reports are due. Emission statements are due. So that's all about a week to go on those. And then just a couple other things going on. You know, the incinerator permitting exemption regulatory changes that we've been talking about for a long time now have gone to regs review, were initially rejected, but you know, DEEP turned around an update with, you know, the minor changes, wording changes, and just some clarifications on the changes to definitions that they were proposing as part of that. So that has been resent back to LLRC. So that'll go up at the next meeting, which is next week. So hopefully those changes are satisfactory, and we'll finally get that program finalized and across the finish line. And then lastly, DEEP is in the process of updating Section 4, which is their regulation that applies to continuous opacity and emissions monitoring. They have circulated a informal initial draft, their proposed changes. So anyone that has continuous emission monitoring or opacity monitoring should just take a look, be aware of those changes that are coming. I haven't looked at it in detail yet. It seems like it's pretty minor. Keith Hill said they just kind of want to, it's an old rule, they want to get updated. One thing that is, I guess, helpful to folks that do have these continuous monitoring systems, Keith Hill said that, you know, the intent moving forward is to remove the requirement to submit extensive data files with quarterly SEMS reports, so that if DEEP wants to review any of the data, they'll request it specifically, but otherwise the quarterly reporting will be limited to a very brief summary form, and the actual data files, which typically can be pretty lengthy, won't actually need to be submitted going forward once this is finalized. At least that's the intent right now. But so that's really all we had for updates this month. So if there are any questions, just feel free to reach out to Steve or I, and be sure to get all your reports in.
Okay, thanks. Next up is Lee, who will explain to us what happened in Texas, although he didn't know he was going to do that.
Well, that's okay. I can explain what happened in Texas. Texas didn't winterize. It's just that simple. You can hear complaints about how the wind turbines froze, but the fact of the matter is that we've got wind turbines in the North Atlantic and wind turbines in Antarctica. They work because they're winterized. Same thing goes for nuclear power plants and natural gas supplies and everything else. If you don't care for freezing, then you should winterize your power plants. And then, of course, Ted Cruz fled the scene of the crime, so there's that too, which probably didn't help. But that's not really why everybody tuned in. But I think that there are a lot of people who would submit that what happened in Texas was a result of climate change. And here in Connecticut, we have certainly been looking at climate change and trying to figure out how to deal with it. And Governor Lamont and Commissioner Dykes in the past couple of weeks have announced several major initiatives on what they're going to do to combat climate change. The most aggressive and the most controversial is Connecticut's joining the Transportation Climate Initiative program. It's interesting in that the Transportation Climate Initiative, of course, it has an acronym, TCI. TCI only has Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the District of Columbia. So 3 states and a city that have joined in the group. The reality is that New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine all were invited to join, all looked into it, all looked at the costs associated with it, and said no thank you. So the TCI is a regional cap and trade program, much like what we have with RGGI for the electric power generation sector. And the fact is that the electric power generation sector was the largest source of carbon emissions, arguably, in the Northeast. But as a result of RGGI, as a result of renewable energy coming online, as a result of saving millstone, et cetera, electric generation is now no longer the largest source. The largest source of carbon emissions is transportation. And so this program is trying to deal with that. 38% of our carbon emissions are coming from transportation. And so what they've done is, building on the success of RGGI, they're trying to do a cap and trade system for transportation fuels, which is gasoline and diesel, essentially. And the idea is that they would start by implementing an allowance system that would result in an additional tax being placed on the gasoline of 5 cents per gallon starting in 2023. If you read the Hartford Courant, the petroleum wholesalers and the retailers have a very different view as to what that's going to be. Lamont and Dykes have said that they'll be able to regulate how much that fee is going to be by allowing additional allowances to be placed into the system, et cetera, et cetera. But some folks have said that these taxes could get north of 30 cents per gallon in fairly short order. My favorite was the quote from Chris Herb, who represents the gasoline retailers in Connecticut, and he stated that he wouldn't trust the 5 cent per gallon number, quote, as far as I could throw the governor, close quote. Now, Chris is a pretty big guy and the governor's a pretty small guy, but I still submit that the governor cannot be thrown particularly far. So with that by way of backdrop, there are three major bills that the Lamont administration is trying to push through the session that I just wanted to talk about. One of them is Senate Bill 884, which is the act reducing transportation carbon emissions, and that's the bill that would implement TCI formally in the state of Connecticut. What it would do is, in addition to everything that I just mentioned, it would mandate that the proceeds from these charges go and be invested in transportation projects and electrical vehicle charging stations that would reduce carbon emissions. So a lot of mass transit and a lot of EV charging stations. 1/3 of the proceeds are targeted to benefit communities that are overburdened by air pollution and underserved by public transportation. And 24.4 million of the proceeds from the first year would be used to preserve existing transit programs, and then the rest would go to new transit programs. The interesting thing about all of this is the goal is to reduce the carbon emissions by 19%, I believe. I'm just going to check my notes. 26% between 2023 and 2032. And in that period of time from 2023 to 2032, the total net proceeds that are estimated to be going into Connecticut's transportation and zero emissions projects will be over $1 billion. And that's a significant amount of cash. And my concern is, as with everything in Connecticut, we're going to earmark this money for particular funding places, but we're not actually going to put it where we say we're going to put it. And the politicians will raid this coffer as they've done so many times before. There's two other bills that are on the governor's short list of bills that he wants to see. The second one is SB 882, which is an act concerning climate change mitigation and home energy affordability. This one to me is going to be very interesting. It puts the zero carbon goal that Lamont announced with Executive Order 3, where we're going to be zero carbon for electricity generation by 2040. It puts that goal into the statute so that it's no longer just an executive order. It has the full benefit of being an enacted law. It will also allow DEEP to procure 1% of our energy load from demand response and energy efficiency measures. So things such as automatically turning down thermostats in the summertime or turning them up so it's a little warmer in the summertime when we have overloaded grids and the like. It's only 1%, but that's actually going to make a fairly big difference if it's used as peak shaving. But this is the one that really caught my eye. It's going to require individuals who are either selling or looking to lease residential properties to either conduct a home energy audit and provide prospective purchasers and renters with the home energy label from that audit, i.e. how much the annual costs are for energy, or make people provide the last 12 months of utility bills for any property that you're looking to sell or any residential property that you're looking to rent where the utilities are not included. That's going to put a lot of onus on the consumer, and I'm just not sure how much appetite there is for that. I would imagine that it's more appetite than an additional gasoline tax, but I don't know. And then finally, The other one I wanted to call your attention to is House Bill 6441, which is an act concerning climate change adaptation. The major highlights there are that this bill is really designed to deal with the impacts associated with what we expect will happen as a result of climate change. So it's designed to address sea level rise, flooding, drought, heat waves, et cetera, and strengthen our infrastructure accordingly. It now authorizes all municipalities to have municipal stormwater authorities should they so want. Those authorities will do more to enforce stormwater permitting requirements and the like, which right now has been predominantly the province of Connecticut Deep. And then municipalities will also be authorized to have an option. They won't have to do this, but they'll have an option to adopt a buyer's real estate conveyance fee. The local fee would then be used for community projects for climate mitigation, resilience, adaptation, or other community environmental projects. And it would authorize municipalities, flood control and erosion control boards to undertake climate resilience activities such as restoring floodplains, reserving space for wetland migration. And then in just a wild card, it expands the scope of the Connecticut Green Bank significantly. The Connecticut Green Bank right now focuses solely on renewable energy and energy efficiency. This part of the bill will allow the Green Bank to venture into a whole variety of projects where it can use its bonding authority, and it'll be able to use its bonding authority to fund investments in water, waste recycling, climate adaptation, resilience, agriculture projects, land conservation, parks and recreation, as well as playing in, quote, environmental markets, which it isn't entirely clear what that means. Those are the big pushes that the Lamont administration is doing on the energy side. It all pretty much relates to his concerns over climate. It begs the question as to whether or not Connecticut is going it alone or going it with very limited company on climate change, as we think that the nation is going to do something fairly substantial on climate change given the change in administrations, but that all remains to be seen. The only other thing of note is that the Connecticut Deep did in fact do its integrated resource plan. It had public meetings, it had technical meetings, it extended the deadline for comments. However, those comments were due Wednesday. Unsurprisingly, the IRP follows many of the themes that I just described in the statutory packages. One thing that the IRP does do is it pats Connecticut on the back for getting to 91% of its renewable energy goals or zero carbon goals, excuse me, by counting its chickens before they've hatched, in terms of assuming that every last offshore wind project is going to come online in the time frame that was described by those project developers. With the Biden administration, that's probably a more likely than not proposition, but I'm not sure that we can go and simply get rid of all of our non-intermittent, i.e. fossil fuel resources just yet. And I think that the experience in Texas, bringing this full circle, Chuck, will demonstrate that having a variety of energy sources is the best way to keep the grid functioning and to keep the lights on. So that is my presentation, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chuck.
Anything on the public hearing yesterday to separate per and deep?
To be perfectly candid with you, I was working on billable work, so I don't know. I think, frankly, I think that would be a brilliant idea. I think that the integration of Pura and Deep has caused some significant problems. We also are theoretically two Pura commissioners short. 2 years ago, the legislature expanded that body to 5, and they still haven't filled those 2 vacant seats. The only other thing that I'll note is there are a lot of people calling for the messing with the Connecticut Siting Council and I'm tracking that, and hopefully all of those proposals die the nasty death that they deserve.
Okay. Anything from Eric or John on the legislature, on the energy side?
Yeah, I'd just say I think Lee covered it very good. He covered kind of the major bills, and of course, we're following the decoupling bill. It's a little political. Didn't decide to jump in on that one in particular, but certainly paying close attention to what's going on. A lot of the energy bills are just now coming out in draft, so I think over the next couple of weeks we'll have a little more to look at. It's all proposed bills at this point that are difficult to target where the difficulties for us may be.
Ashley, anything on the environmental front that you want to talk about?
I think that's what next month's meeting's for.
The environmental bills? We had that last.
Well, but all the bills.
Okay. So
Eric just asked the question, any discussion at all within DEEP or the legislature on cost concerns? And Eric, I think the answer to that question is no. What DEEP has done consistently since they started negotiating the contracts for Millstone and for the offshore wind projects is DEEP has presumed that we are going to zero carbon by 2040, and therefore the only way that they're addressing cost is they're saying, since zero carbon by 2040 is a foregone conclusion, this will be the least expensive way for us to get to that goal. And so to the extent that they're talking about cost, they're talking about this would be the least expensive Rolls-Royce that you can purchase, because you have to purchase a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley. I'm using a bit of hyperbole, but you get the gist of what I'm suggesting here. They're not considering continuing with fossil generation, and frankly, the auction, the next ISO, the last ISO auction just closed 2 weeks ago. And while the capacity prices are up a little bit, they're still not up at a level where any fossil fuel generation would want to get built in New England anywhere. Right now, the prices are anywhere from $261 to, I forget what it is. It's $3.50, I think, up in the constrained areas in Massachusetts. But that's not enough to have anybody want to build new fossil fuel generation. So in some ways, DEEP may be right. I think if DEEP were serious about controlling costs, we have enough intermittent resources now that we have contracted and we need to get built. I think that the big thing is that we have to look at energy storage, batteries and other things, in order to store the energy for these intermittent resources. And Eric just asked, or I guess Eric's texting now. He just said in the chat, to your point about Connecticut going alone, we may get to zero carbon goal as inexpensively as we can. Who cares if energy is cheaper in all other parts of the country? And Eric's 100% right about that observation. That's the thing that concerns me to a certain extent. We're never going to have the cheap energy, and people who have tuned in before have heard me say this. We're never going to have the cheap energy that, you know, Washington State has with its abundance of hydroelectric, or Kentucky has, or Georgia, or some of these other places that are traditionally low. The concern that I have, particularly with this TCI piece, it's not going to show up on your electric bill, but it is going to show up in your pocketbook. Is this is something that was too radical for the vast majority of even New England. At least with RGGI, we're not going it alone within the Northeast region. There are other reasons why Connecticut's energy prices are higher in the Northeast, but RGGI isn't among them because RGGI impacts Massachusetts, for example. But this TCI thing does scare me because it's something where we're really it's just the 3 southern New England states, and for some reason the District of Columbia, but there isn't a large regional swath. And that concerns me because I think that that's going to make Connecticut not only anti-competitive across the country, but anti-competitive regionally. So, sorry, I was doing the speaking of 2 people, but I think Eric's internet connection is wobbly, so there you have it. And then Raina asked a question about testing wastewater for Pfas as stated by Connecticut Deep. That's obviously not energy, but I don't know if anybody has the answer to that question, but I thought I'd call somebody's attention to it because it is a question in the chat.
Thanks, Lee. I can try and venture. Definitely requested. I advise my clients not to, since there is not an EPA approved method for testing wastewater at this time. I think it's coming soon, but currently not. We don't have an EPA method. And I did forget to share this with the group, so I'll do that now. Pre-treatment permits are going to have some language that DEEP is working on right now, hasn't been finalized, making a compliance schedule requirement to test for PFAS. So once I see that language, I'll be sure to share it. Again, that was for pre-treatment permits.
Lee, it's Raina. Can I follow up with Deb on that?
You can do whatever you want as long as Deb's willing.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you for that update. Just want to share with you, New Jersey is going ahead. We had a Clean Water Council last month regarding NJIPDs and wastewater treatment plants and POTWs for PFAS. Currently, as of June 1st, 2020, effective discharge to groundwater permits will have PFAS monitoring in those permits, and you have to, if you have hits over our wonderful groundwater standards of 13 and 14 parts per trillion, you will have to find the source and treat it. So they are moving to the surface water and the NJIPDs direct and indirect in New Jersey. At the hearing, industry as well as the wastewater treatment plants pushed for doing monitoring and upstream tracking mechanisms. So I'm hoping that in your pre-treatment, that's going to get pushed there, not to go ahead and do the testing. So just keep that in mind. New Jersey is, we're going out in front, and we are looking at Colorado. They just issued a narrative policy last July, pretty extensive. So you may want to look at that. You can reach out to me. We can talk further about it, but just curious what Connecticut is stirring up, because all the states are talking.
Yeah, and I'd say Michigan's out there in front in terms of pre-treatment. So the difficulty here in Connecticut is, you can test all you want, but what do you compare it to? We don't have a number yet to compare your PFAS results to. So that's I guess another reason.
I hear you.
To not test.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. I haven't heard much on this from Ozzy's group, other than, like I said, that pre-treatment language going into permits.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. It looks like Plato posted a long EPRA question. Anybody want to take a shot at that? Or are you just letting us know about this, Plato? Doesn't seem to be a question as a more a statement. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? We are nearly at end of the 10:30 hour, or half hour, as the case may be. Marcy, remind people about the March meeting. I know it was up there before, but I didn't write it down.
Our next meeting is March 19th.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Got a good crowd. And it looks like still snowing where I am. So I'm going to wait until it ends before I go back out again. Thanks. Stay safe. Stay safe and be healthy. Take care.